Good morning, I'm Craig DeGrelli. It's Tuesday, April 15th, 2025, and these are your Unbiased Updates. Tariff talk turns to computer chips, the review that is now taking place, and the push to see if America can handle the workload despite all of the foreign manufacturing. And saying it will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights, Harvard University decides to forego more than $2 billion in federal funding. The decision by the Ivy League school when it comes to on-campus protests and activism.
From the Straight Arrow News Studio, bringing the stories that matter to you from across the United States and around the world, these are today's Unbiased Updates.
The Trump administration is taking the next steps toward imposing more tariffs on key items by launching investigations into imports of computer chips, chip-making equipment, as well as pharmaceuticals. In notices posted to the Federal Register late Monday, the Commerce Department said it's investigating how imports of computer chips, equipment to make them, and products that contain them, which include many daily necessities such as cars, refrigerators, and smartphones, affect national security. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 permits the president to order tariffs for the sake of national security. Although President Trump paused most of his biggest tariff increases last week for 90 days, excluding imports from China, he has said he still plans on imposing tariffs on pharmaceutical drugs, lumber, copper, and computer chips. The Commerce Department's investigation is to assess whether the United States can meet its own demand for computer chips and the role of foreign manufacturing, assembly, testing, and packaging in meeting those needs. Meantime, Trump's top economic advisor said Monday the U.S. is close to deals with more than 10 trading partners over the current tariffs that are on hold. And the president himself suggested he might temporarily exempt the auto industry from tariffs he previously imposed to give car makers time to overhaul their complex supply chains, saying they need a little bit of time to relocate production from Canada, Mexico, and other parts of the world to the United States. The Trump administration is making it clear a Maryland man who was deported due to an administrative error will not be brought back to the United States by the U.S. government. As President Trump met with the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, in the Oval Office on Monday, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller said the decision to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia is not in the United States' hands.
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
Miller also contends Abrego Garcia lost his deportation protection when President Trump designated the MS-13 gang a terrorist organization. The man's family has denied administration claims that Garcia has ties to the gang. There is still a chance Abrego Garcia could be returned to the U.S., but as Straight Arrow News reporter Kara Rucker explains, El Salvador's president is nixing the idea.
In a meeting with President Trump on Monday, El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele said it was preposterous to think his country could send back a Maryland man who was wrongly deported by the Trump administration, labeling Kilmar Abrego Garcia a terrorist and saying he has no authority to return him to the United States. Take a listen.
Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Trump directed reporters with questions to Attorney General Pam Bondi, who said this about Abrego Garcia's court-ordered return.
First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us.
Bondi called the incident an international and foreign affairs matter and says the U.S. would facilitate Abrego Garcia's return if El Salvador decides to send him back by providing a plane. Justices Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote a statement in reference to the affirmation, writing, "The government's argument, moreover, implies that it could deport and incarcerate any person, including U.S. citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene." Immigrant advocacy group CASA gave a statement about the case, saying they are outraged by the unlawful deportation, describing Abrego Garcia as, quote, an excellent father of 3 children, and arguing the defiance of the court order from the federal government puts his life in danger. The Trump administration reported Abrego Garcia is alive and detained in El Salvador.
That was our Kara Rucker reporting. Abrego Garcia's attorneys told ABC News they will be asking a judge to hold members of the Trump administration in contempt for defying the judge's order to facilitate his return, saying that may be the only way to get them to move quickly on this case. This morning, a reprieve for more than 500,000 migrants who entered the United States under the Biden administration, but were recently urged to self-deport by the Trump administration. A federal judge in Boston has blocked the Trump plan to terminate their legal status as of next Thursday. The migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela have legal protection known as immigration parole. Under the program, the Biden administration allowed the migrants to fly to the United States if they had a sponsor in the U.S. Once here, the government granted them immigration parole and allowed them to work in the U.S. lawfully for 2 years. However, the new administration had said recently they would need to self-deport by April 24th or face arrest and deportation by federal agents. Judge Indira Talwani ruled those mass parole terminations could not happen without each case reviewed individually. Harvard University says it will not play ball with the Trump administration, refusing to accept a proposed agreement to eliminate its DEI programs and screen international students for ideological concerns, including anti-Semitism. That decision now costing the Ivy League school billions of dollars in federal funding. Straight Arrow News reporter Lauren Keenan has details.
In a memo to the public, Harvard's president, Dr. Alan Garber, said late Friday the Trump administration expanded its list of demands for schools if they want to maintain their financial relationship with the federal government. Garber says the federal government is not interested in working with Harvard to address anti-Semitism in a cooperative and constructive manner, adding that some of the government's demands are aimed at combating anti-Semitism. The majority represent direct governmental regulation of the intellectual conditions at Harvard, Garber writes. The letter sent to Harvard from the General Services Administration, the U.S. Department of Education, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services details a list of changes the Ivy League college should make in principle in order to keep its federal funding. The Trump administration last month said 60 schools were under investigation for civil rights allegations, and Harvard was one of those universities. The provisions include governance and leadership reforms, merit-based hiring practices, merit-based admissions, international admission reform, student discipline reform and accountability, discontinuing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and auditing programs with egregious records of anti-Semitism or other bias. President Garber provided the letter in his memo and says the demands by the federal government are to gain control over the Harvard community. The administration's prescription goes beyond the power of the federal government. It violates Harvard's First Amendment rights and exceeds the statutory limits of the government's authority under Title VI. And it threatens our values as a private institution devoted to the pursuit, production, and dissemination of knowledge. No government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue, Garber writes. It's unclear what next steps the Trump administration will take. We have reached out to the Department of Education for comment.
That was our Lauren Keenan reporting. The Trump administration has focused on colleges and universities as part of its crackdown on DEI programs and anti-Semitism on campuses nationwide. Earlier this year, it cut $400 billion in funding for Columbia University over its handling of the pro-Palestinian protests that erupted on campus and left many Jewish students in fear as the war in Gaza took place in the Middle East, pitting Israel against Hamas. Columbia then acquiesced to many of the White House demands. And just last week, the White House said it halted more than $1 billion in federal funding for Cornell University and roughly $790 million for Northwestern University. The Trump administration has ordered the National Institutes of Health to study detransitioning among transgender individuals and any regret they may experience following gender-affirming care, according to an internal memo obtained by multiple outlets. The memo was sent out 2 weeks ago by then-acting director Matthew Mamoli. It reportedly instructs the NIH to study the effects of, quote, social transition and or chemical and surgical mutilation in children who transition, with the White House specifically requesting research on regret and detransition in both children and adults who have undergone gender-affirming care, which can be a range of social, psychological, and medical treatments. The memo also stated the research is very important to President Trump and Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who are calling for NIH funding announcements for the research within 6 months. Finally this morning, the WNBA is welcoming its rookie class with the 2025 draft, getting a new injection of star power after last year saw a surge in popularity for the league. But like anything else, there have been growing pains. Straight Arrow News sports reporter Chris Francis has a look at some of this year's top draft picks and the details on changes the league is making to ensure player safety.
The WNBA is 1 month from their 29th season and has a new crop of star players to bolster its popularity. Monday, the league's entry draft was held, and like last season when Caitlin Clark was the #1 overall pick, this year's top player is also no surprise. UConn's Paige Beckers, who led the Huskies to an NCAA title just a week ago, is on her way to Dallas to revive a Wings franchise that finished 9-31 last season. Another feather in the cap of the league. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert talked about capitalizing on the growth Monday.
The momentum from last year is carried over in a big way, fueled by obviously incredible fan engagement, rising TV viewership, and a league stacked with extraordinary talent.
But there are some things the league has addressed in the offseason, namely players' health and safety and the battle against online hate and vitriol. Engelbert announced what she called a four-pronged approach to those issues and has set up a task force to make improvements. The 4 touch points include monitoring of players' social media for negative comments and threats using artificial intelligence, better in-arena fan conduct standards, better security measures at league and player facilities, and dedicated mental health clinicians on call for players should they need them.
I think there is just a continuing drain on all of us, on players, on staff at our teams. I'm sure on all of you too, just continued unaccountability for people who type things in social media. And our players are digital natives. They're in their 20s, young 20s. And then obviously more veteran players are 20s into 30s, and they take everything very hard, and it's a toll on them.
Some of the youngest players were drafted Monday. After Beckers went #1 overall, the Seattle Storm selected 19-year-old 6'6" center Dominique Malonga from France at #2. The 3rd and 4th picks were back-to-back from the Washington Mystics. They chose Sonia Citron from Notre Dame and Kiki Irifin from Southern Cal, an instant rebuild in D.C. And the 5th pick in the 3rd round went to the expansion Golden State Valkyries, who made their first ever draft pick 19-year-old guard Juste Jochite from Lithuania. Several teams like Washington, Connecticut, and Dallas had multiple first-round picks. Raising up the bottom teams is crucial for the league's success.
WNBA training camps open in just 2 weeks. Those are your unbiased updates for this Tuesday. A quick reminder before we go, it's tax day, so if you have not already, don't forget to file your return. We'll see you back here tomorrow. For all of us here at Straight Arrow News, I'm Craig DeGrelli. Have a great day.